when the little girl asked the billionaire CEO, "Be my dad?" A heart-wrenching flight revelation. The old private jet soared through the stormy skies, rumbling like a caged beast. Inside, the air was thick with tension. A young girl, no more than 7, sat with wide, innocent eyes, staring up at the towering figure of the billionaire CEO, Julian Kane. The moment those 4 words slipped from her trembling lips, "Be my dad?" time stopped. Gasps erupted. The half-finished champagne flutes clinked together, as if in shock. A thunderclap from outside matched the tumult inside the cabin, perfectly underscoring the gravity of the question. Julian's jaw tightened, his rugged features momentarily softening as his icy demeanor faltered. The girl, dressed in a frilly pink dress that seemed almost too delicate for the harsh world outside, clutched a battered teddy bear to her chest. Its fur was matted, but it was clear this toy was her only comfort. The other passengers, expecting only luxury and boredom on this flight, now found themselves riveted, caught in a story unfolding before them, with no script. But what could drive a girl to ask such a powerful man for something so deeply personal? A quick glance around revealed troubled faces, whispering concerns, and a hint of disbelief. The air crackled with questions. Why was she alone? Where were her parents? Why had they boarded this flight? The storm outside intensified, dark clouds swirling menacingly, mirroring the questions swirling within the cabin. Each flash of lightning illuminated Julian's struggling resolve. It was like watching a monster grapple with its conscience. He was used to the boardroom and balance sheets, not the vulnerability of a little girl. The hum of the jet engines faded, replaced by a thick silence, only broken by the distant echoes of thunder, and the girl's soft sniffles, enough to squeeze the heart of anyone who heard her. And before things could spiral out of control, Julian cleared his throat, trying to mask his own turmoil. "Why would you want that?" he finally asked, his voice strained. What he really wanted to know was how on earth this child had pierced through his steel armor, how she had pulled at something buried deep within him, a desire for connection that seemed lost forever. "Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads-up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As thunder roared directly overhead, a piercing silence filled the jet once more, amplifying the emotional weight of the moment. The girl's gaze never wavered. It was unwavering, brimming with hope and desperation, like a candle flickering in a storm. Would Julian reveal his secret? What had brought him here? And could he find something resembling warmth in this cold, materialistic world? The jet felt like a crucible now, holding not just lives, but futures that could change in an instant. And in that charged moment, Julian's heart raced, drumming against his ribs. Could he even be the father she sought? Was he destined to melt from stone to flesh? It was a question that hovered in the air, a mystery yet to be uncovered, leaving everyone aboard hanging in breathless anticipation. Julian's silence seemed to stretch, like the shadows cast by lightning outside the window. The eyes of the little girl pierced into him, searching for something. Hope? Acceptance? Love? Each thunderclap reminded him of storms he'd weathered, both in the sky and in life. But this was different. This was raw, unfiltered. I just thought, the girl's voice wobbled, her fragile frame clutching the teddy bear even tighter, as if it were a lifeboat in a stormy sea. You look like you could be a really good dad. Her sincerity wrapped around Julian's heart like a vice, squeezing the breath from his lungs. Around them, the other passengers exchanged glances, uncomfortably shifting in their seats. Some looked sympathetic, others puzzled. They were just trying to get home, but now they were entangled in a human drama that ignited a mix of hope and disquiet. "Why are you even here alone?" Julian managed, brushing a hand through his dark hair, trying to summon the authority he displayed in front of board members. Yet, with this child, he found himself stumbling over his words. His world of structured meetings and endless spreadsheets seemed centuries away, and for the first time in years, Julian felt the pressure of vulnerability he normally kept at bay. "Mommy and Daddy are gone." She spoke slowly, as if saying the words could make them less true. "I don't have anyone. I thought maybe if I asked, maybe you would say yes." The storm roared outside, rattling the jet's frame, as if the universe protested this innocence. Julian felt a knot forming in his throat, a tightness that spoke of anger, regret, and grief. Who was he to respond to this sweet child's earnest request? His every instinct screamed that he had neither the capacity nor the qualifications to take on such a role. But then, he thought of his own childhood quiet dinners in a massive house, wealth that couldn't tea by warmth, the absence of love exerting its own kind of pressure. Hadn't he carried that loneliness into adulthood like a shadow? And here was a girl, a tiny reflection of that void, an opportunity to rewrite the script of his life. "Do you know who I am?" Julian asked, fighting against panic. It felt as if he stood on the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss of possibilities. "You're Julian Kane," she whispered. "The man on the TV. The billionaire." The other passengers leaned in, their interest piqued. The girl had crystallized his identity into something tangible, something humane. The realization landed like a stone in the pit of his stomach. Beyond board meetings and shareholder reports, was he ready to embrace the role this child envisioned for him? "Why me?" he pressed, desperate to understand. "Because you look sad. But I see it. I see the love in your eyes. I think you have it somewhere. You could help. You could try. You just need to believe." Her voice was so small, so fragile yet unspeakably brave. Glimmers of doubt flashed through Julian's mind. What did he know about being a father? But as he looked into her trusting eyes, something flickered within him, a yearning for connection, for compassion. The storm raged outside, but did he dare to let his heart open? Maybe I could, he started, but the words hung in the air, unfinished. A jolt spoke through the jet as turbulence rocked them violently, and they all gasped collectively, the cabin lighting flickering ominously. With each bump, Julian felt the resolve within him teetering. What if he took this leap? As the jet steadied, a sudden realization swept over him. Whatever shape his life took, the stakes had never been higher. "Julian," she whispered, breaking the heavy silence. Will you at least think about it?" His heart raced as he weighed the possibility of saying yes. And all around, the storm outside continued to rage, threatening to unravel their fates. What lay ahead? With every heartbeat, a decision loomed, one that would change everything. Could Julian Kane remain the same man, or would he step into the role the girl so desperately wished for? As thunder clapped once more, the questions spun wildly, leaving an air charged with uncertainty and a dawning possibility. Julian's thoughts swirled like the wind outside, a tempest of confusion and fear. What if he said yes? What if he stepped out of the carefully crafted box he had locked himself into for so long? The little girl, with her pleading eyes, was not just asking for a father. She was pleading for hope, for a lifeline in the chaos of her young life. And just like that, the jet jerked violently again, plunging into a pocket of turbulence that set everything on board flying momentarily into chaos. Screams echoed, and the overhead compartments rattled as their contents threatened to spill. Julian instinctively reached out, grabbing the little girl's hand, a protective instinct flickering to life within him. "Hold on. We'll be okay." His own voice fought against the cacophony around them, forcing out an optimism he didn't genuinely feel. The girl squeezed his hand so tightly, it felt as if she was anchoring them both. The plane steadied after a few harrowing moments, but the tension remained thick, the uncertainty stretching like elastic. Passengers looked at each other in disbelief, some clutching their heads, others staring wide-eyed. The little girl turned her gaze to him, her innocence somehow unfazed by the storm both outside and within the enclosed cabin. "You're strong," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the lingering noise. "I can feel it." Julian wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream. What did she know about strength? He had built his empire on the illusion of unbroken confidence, on the facade of untouchable success. But here, in this moment, he felt like the weakest man alive. The feelings he buried screamed for attention. His throat tightened, choking on old memories of loneliness and heartbreak. For years, he convinced himself that vulnerability was a weakness. But here was a child one he'd only just met who saw right through the polished exterior, unearthing the chaos hiding beneath. She believed in him, and that thought alone was terrifying. "Maybe," he stammered. "Maybe I could at least help you find someone else, someone who can know." She interrupted, alarm crossing her small features. "I need you. You can do this." Her earnestness pressed onto him like an unyielding weight. "Please. I don't want to be alone anymore." The storm outside raged further, as if mirroring the tumult within Julian's chest. Every fiber of his being wrestled with the truth of her words. What was he waiting for? Fear? Shame? Did he really want to take that dive into something unknown, but deeply human? Julian's stomach fluttered. Could he accept her plea not just for her, but for himself? What if saying yes didn't lead to parenthood, but instead to emotion canceled by all his fears, a decision that anchored his character in purpose? Thunder rumbled like a warning as he met her gaze, all hesitations threading together into a singular moment. "I'll think about it," he finally said, the words tumbling out, heavier than mere syllables, each one laden with potential. Her face lit up, and that spark touched something deep in him, a flicker of hope. "You mean it?" Her eyes danced, as though daring to believe in miracles. "Yeah, I mean it." Julian felt the shift, as if at that moment the storm calmed just a little. But what he didn't see, what he couldn't guess, was that it wouldn't be just about him taking on a little girl. This was the start of an extraordinary journey, one that would unravel secrets he wasn't prepared to face. As turbulence lightened, the atmosphere shifted into something different, like stepping into a game where the stakes grew right before his eyes. The feeling of impending dread filled the cabin again, an ominous reminder that all was not yet well. "Julian," she murmured, her voice suddenly serious. "What happens if the storm finds us?" Every head in the cabin turned toward them, the air thick with anticipation. The question hung heavy in the air, vibrating with an unknown terror, a hint of something darker looming just beyond the horizon of their lives. In that charged moment, Julian realized the journey he had chosen, or perhaps had been chosen for, was only just beginning. And as always, storms would chase them, shrouded in shadows yet to be revealed. Julian's heart raced, a drum thrumming in his chest. The little girl's question lingered like fog. "What happens if the storm finds us?" The weight of her words clawed at him. The turbulence had lessened, but anxiety left a bitter taste in his mouth. He glanced out the window, where black clouds swirled, dark and menacing, just like the thoughts crowding his mind. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice threading through the dim cabin. She held his gaze with an intensity that felt otherworldly. "The storm is more than rain, isn't it? It's the scary stuff, the bad things. It's inside people, too." A shudder ran through Julian. He wanted to laugh, brush off her fears, but there was no mocking a child's insight. Instead, he could only nod numbly as his own past flared up like warning signals. "I don't think storms can catch us if we stay together," she continued, a hint of daring in her tone. "You will protect me, right?" The question didn't just beget a promise. It confronted everything Julian had avoided for years. Protecting her meant stepping into the role of a father, something he had never allowed himself to consider. What if he failed? What if he couldn't? Of course, he managed to say, though the uncertainty lay heavy in the air between them. As if sensing his trepidation, she squeezed his hand tighter. The small gesture ignited the flicker of hope buried deep within him. But just as quickly, a bone-rattling jolt shook the plane anew, tossing passengers back into chaos. "Breathe! Keep holding on!" he shouted as the cabin erupted in panic once more. Voices raised. The flight attendants rushed down the aisle, shouting instructions that were drowned in the collective fear. Julian's stomach knotted. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the jerk ceased, and calm returned almost too abrupt. The plane glided through a pocket of air that felt like a deceptive lull, but even in this stillness, the girl's grip remained. "Will you stay with me?" she asked, her fear barely concealed now. He swallowed hard, looking into those innocent eyes. "I'm not going anywhere. Not while you're here." But could he really hold himself to that? Was he ready to melt the icy walls of his own heart? A low, ominous rumble filled the air, causing the cabin to quake in hesitation. Julian found himself once again leaning into the reassuring pressure of the little girl's hand. She was his tether, a delicate line that might keep him grounded. Then, without warning, a scream erupted from the back. Heads whipped around, and Julian's stomach dropped. The panic rippled through the crowd, a collective gasp cutting off the last thread of calm. "Julian! What is happening?" the girl whimpered, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned to look in the direction of the chaos, a chill running down his spine. A man was shouting, his face twisted in terror. "We're losing altitude. We need to land." The cabin roared to life with frantic movements and terrified cries. Julian felt sweat prickling at the back of his neck. In an instant, his world shrank to the girl next to him. "Stay close. No matter what happens." As the plane dropped suddenly, Julian's heart went with it, pounding wildly against his ribcage. He felt mere inches from disaster. He could feel the weight of lives in his hands, the fear, the dreams, their cries. The girl's small voice pulled him back, clear as day, cutting through the din. "Julian! Hold on!" he shouted as the roar of the engines blended with the panic. "We will get through this." But deep inside, he knew nothing was guaranteed, not even survival. The plane plummeted again, the turbulence clawing at everyone. Julian's mind raced with thoughts of safety, his promise to protect her. Would he be able to live up to it? As the plane fought against the storm and its secrets, Julian felt at once lost and found. The stakes were rising, and with them, the pressing knowledge that something darker awaited them. And with his next breath, the question bolted back into the forefront of his mind. What would he truly do to keep her safe? Suddenly, the storm's secrets began to reveal themselves, as terrifying as the darkening clouds that enveloped them. And just when he thought he had grasped the answer, it slipped further away. Reality twisted like a knife, and even the little girl's grip felt tenuous in the face of the unknown. The journey continued, each shake of the plane giving birth to harrowing possibilities. Would they rise above together, or would everything come crashing down? Julian could only hope for a miracle or prepare for the worst. A violent lurch sent Julian's stomach into freefall, the shriek of metal on metal tearing through the cabin. The lights flickered, and the overhead compartments rattled ominously. He locked eyes with the little girl, her face a mix of confusion and terror. This was no longer just a flight, it was a descent into chaos. "Julian!" she cried, her voice rising above the cacophony. "What is happening? I'm scared." He pulled her closer, feeling her small frame tremble against his. "Just hang on. I'm right here." His own fear was a beast clawing at his insides, but he pushed it down, focusing on her. The plane dipped again, an unmerciful plunge that stole the breath from Julian's lungs. A man near the front stood up, panic gripping him like a vice. "We're going to crash!" His voice shattered the air, igniting a fresh wave of terror among the passengers. "Somebody get him to sit down!" A flight attendant shouted, her calm demeanor cracking as she struggled to keep her composure. "Julian," the girl urged. "What if we crash? What happens? Will the storm find us?" A lump lodged in Julian's throat. "We aren't crashing. Not if I can help it." But he knew that was a lie. Each sudden drop felt like fate's cruel hand, and he grappled with the sinking feeling that he might not be strong enough to protect her, not from the storm, not from the darkness brewing inside his own heart. His grip tightened around the girl's hand, their fingers intertwined like lifelines in a turbulent sea. He scanned the cabin, the faces of the frightened passengers a blur of shifting dread. For each flash of panic, there were moments of unexpected resolve. A couple embraced tightly, a mother whispered reassurances to her child, and an elderly man closed his eyes, praying. "Stay with me," Julian said, his voice firm despite the chaos surrounding them. "Remember what you said? If we stay together, we'll be okay. Promise?" she asked, wide-eyed and hopeful. "Promise." The word hung in the air, mingling with the tension. But beneath the surface, doubt crept like a shadow, tainting the vow. Could he really hold on to her, keep her safe when everything felt poised to unravel? The engine sputtered and roared louder than ever. The flight attendants climbed over seats, their faces strained, as they shouted instructions, most lost in the frenzy. Julian's heart raced. In that moment, it wasn't just the plane he was worried about. It was everything that had brought him to this moment. The failures, the missed chances, the life he'd once envisioned slipping further away. Then came a sharp crack, the sound like thunder within the confined space of the airplane. The lights flickered again, casting eerie shadows, and Julian felt a cold dread that something had shattered, something vital. In the dim light, he caught sight of one of the attendants, clutching her shoulder. Blood seeped through her uniform, creating a macabre contrast against the sterile white fabric. Panic ignited anew. "We need to land this plane. Now!" she cried, her voice choked with urgency. Julian's resolve hardened into armor. "We will land," he said through gritted teeth, heart racing. "But first, we need to get through this." The stakes elevated, and he could feel the weight of every decision settling upon his shoulders. Suddenly, a loud scream pierced through the turmoil, shattering any semblance of order. It was a primal sound, raw and desperate. Julian's breath hitched in his throat. The girl looked up, confusion morphing into dread. "What was that?" Julian swallowed. "Let us focus on just us for now. Can you do that?" She nodded, fear still clinging to her, but it wasn't too late to kindle that flicker of hope. Another sudden drop sent them both lunging toward the aisle, the world outside their tiny window morphing into a swirling vortex of black and gray. "Stay close," he shouted, battling against impending doom. The storm's secrets were far more than just outside forces. They were manifesting in the air, echoing through every passenger, including himself. But what lurked beneath the surface was as disturbing as the storm raging outside. Things were about to change one way or another. The question now lay heavy in the air. Would he rise to the occasion or fall into the very chaos he feared? As the plane gave another wrenching jolt, Julian knew the answer was about to reveal itself one way or another. Julian's heart pounded violently against his ribcage, the turmoil outside matching the chaos within. Each shriek of the plane's frame echoed his internal struggle. He turned to the little girl, whose eyes held a universe of fear and innocence. "I won't let anything happen to you," he repeated, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Why is everyone screaming?" she asked, her trembling voice catching. Julian swept a glance around the cabin. Anxiety had transformed into a wild beast. Seats were overturned, luggage lay scattered like fallen soldiers, and the faces around him were twisted in panic. The lights flared overhead, flickering ominously like lightning in a storm. Struggling to remain calm, Julian held the girl's gaze. "Just remember to breathe. We're going to get through this." Then the plane lurched left, throwing them against the side. Julian gripped the armrest, fighting the pull of fear that clawed at him. A woman behind them shouted for help, her voice high and cracking. A flight attendant rushed by, her face pale, eyes wide with terror. "Brace for impact," someone yelled from the front. The phrase struck Julian like a punch to the gut. "Impact, what does that mean?" the girl asked, her tiny hand squeezing his. "It means we might have to," Julian faltered, not wanting to finish the thought. "We might have to get ready. Just like in practice drills, okay?" She nodded, but the dread still shadowed her eyes. Most of the passengers had fallen silent, the initial outburst replaced by a collective holding of breath, a tension thick as molasses. He could see their hands gripping the seats, faces pale under the flickering lights. Another jolt sent a wave of nausea sweeping through him, and he felt the weight of responsibility tightening around his chest. "Stay close," he urged, pulling her against him as the plane shifted violently again. "Julian, someone is hurt," she cried, pointing toward the front. There lay one of the attendants motionless, her face drained of color, hands curled into her body unnaturally. A man kneeled beside her, hands gripping his head in disbelief. The sight sent a chill creeping down Julian's spine. This wasn't just a crisis. It was unraveling into something monstrous. He looked at the girl, who was now wide-eyed with horror. "We have to stay calm." That's the most important part, he managed to say, but his own nails dug into his palms. The engine sputtered as if they were waging their own war against the storm. And then Julian heard it, a mechanical whine that spiraled into a shriek, followed by a series of bangs that rattled the entire fuselage. The lights cut out. Darkness enveloped them. They were plunged into an abyss, the gusts of wind howling outside, an ominous reminder of their peril. Julian could hardly see, the only hint of light coming from a distant emergency exit sign, its glow a meager beacon in the dark. The girl stifled a sob. "I want my mom," she whispered. He pulled her tighter, a wave of regret crashing over him for not being the hero he had promised she could rely on. "I know," he whispered, "but we have to be strong together. I need you to trust me." Trust was all he had to offer, the only armor against the storm's cruelty. Suddenly, the dim light flickered back on, illuminating a scene of utter chaos. Passengers were scrambling, desperately trying to find any semblance of stability. Someone was shouting, trying to organize the panic. "There!" the girl pointed, her voice suddenly assertive. "They need help." Julian hesitated, caught in a storm of indecision. If he left her side, would he be putting her in danger? Yet the pressing cries for help tugged at him, a visceral call to action he couldn't ignore. Heart racing, he made a choice. "Wait here. I'll be right back." He locked eyes with her, making sure she understood. As he tore through the aisle, the noise of panic enveloped him, and he felt the pressure of every moment weighing down. With each step, he wondered if he was making the right choice. But no sooner had he reached the front than did another violent shake bring the world crashing down once more. "Get ready." The pilot's voice blared through the intercom, barely discernible above the chaos. "Brace for emergency landing." The word sent adrenaline coursing through his veins, the realization that this was far more dire than he first understood crystallized in that moment. He sprinted back, but all thoughts of reassurance vanished as he spotted the girl. She was gone. He froze, panic coursing through his veins like fire. "Where is she?" he shouted, scanning the chaos for her familiar face. What had he done? A deafening roar of uncertainty echoed in his mind. In a heartbeat, the plane tilted again, and Julian stumbled, a wave of dread crashing over him. Time was running out. "Where did you go?" he whispered to the shadows closing in. Julian's heart raced, an incessant drumbeat of desperation. The girl had vanished into the chaos, and panic clutched at his throat. He scanned the aisle, searching for any sign of her bright little dress, but it was as if she had slipped into the void. "Help! Someone help!" he shouted, his voice barely audible over the tumultuous cries around him. The plummeting plane groaned, metal shrieking in protest against the wind. Every sound was like a knife to his gut, cutting deeper with each desperate plea. "Stay calm," he told himself, but calm was a distant memory. He staggered back, redoubling his search. The emergency exit sign flickered that ghostly green light, illuminating the horror all around him. Screams echoed, people clambered over each other, and in the shifting shadows, he could feel the weight of death itself pressing against his chest. "Where did you go?" he repeated, fighting against his own swirling thoughts. Memories of her laughter played like a haunting melody behind his eyes. Julian felt the lump in his throat tighten, as the realization washed over him. What if he couldn't find her? Suddenly, through the chaos, he caught a glimpse of movement a few rows back. A hand, a small hand, reaching up as if grasping for the air fraught with fear. "There!" he yelled, surging forward. But as he pushed through the disarray, something shifted. The ground beneath him quaked violently, sending bodies scrambling. The plane tilted again, and it felt like the world had shifted on its axis. "Julian!" The girl's voice cut through the storm, bright as a sunbeam piercing through deep clouds. He turned, heart surging with hope, and there she was clinging to the seat, eyes wide and terrified, but alive. Julian rushed to her, grabbing her waist to pull her up. "I thought I lost you." She clung to him, crying silently against his shoulder. "I was so scared." "I know, but we have to go. We need to find a way out." He felt the world around them groan and tremble again, forcing him to act. The escape slides. He recalled seeing those just ahead near the emergency exit. "Stay close," he instructed, heart racing as he began to maneuver through the wreckage, pulling her along. They darted between scattered luggage and terrified faces, the dim light barely illuminating the fear that had transformed once sharp features into masks of panic. As they reached the emergency exit, Julian wiped his brow, trying to focus. He pressed the lever, but it wouldn't budge. He heard a thundering crash from somewhere above, the sound of metal crumpling like a soda can underfoot. He pushed harder. "Come on!" Then, he heard an explosion from behind them. The cabin jolted violently, sending shockwaves through the aisle. The air became thick with smoke, dark and suffocating. "Go, Julian! We have to get out!" The girl screamed, and he could see the terror in her eyes deepening as they were engulfed in chaos. With one last desperate shove, the emergency exit burst open, the slide unfurling into a gaping mouth ready to swallow them whole. He grabbed her hand, the edges of anxiety sapping his courage. "On 3!" he yelled over the cacophony. 1, 2, 3. They plunged into the unknown. The slide rushed them down, adrenaline surging until they landed hard on the tarmac. The roar of the engines faded, replaced by the screeching of helicopters in the air. Julian turned to pull her up, but his heart dropped as he realized they were surrounded by darkness, an entire section of the plane in flames and smoke, the light flickering like a dying star. He felt as if they'd been flung into the maw of a dragon, writhing to escape. "Julian! Look!" She pointed, eyes wide. A man in a uniform was sprinting towards them, helmet glinting in the foreground of horror. But behind him, shapes were shifting in the smoke. Julian's instincts kicked in. "We have to go." He pulled her along the perimeter of the inferno, but shadows lurked behind them, creeping closer. His breath hitched. Were they alone? Footsteps echoed, sharp and urgent. He turned to face the sound. There was nowhere else left to hide. Stop right there. The voice rang out, sharp and demanding. Julian's pulse quickened. Were they friend or foe? Run, sweetie, he shouted, pushing her ahead of him. But who was chasing them? Just as he turned back, dread washed over him, a chilling realization that they might not escape the grasp of this terror unseen. And in that heartbeat, a shadow lunged. Julian barely had time to process the shadow lunging toward him before he felt a firm grip on his arm. The uniformed man had reached them, his presence commanding and urgent. Move! The man barked, dragging Julian and the girl, still clutching his hand, away from the billowing smoke and flames. They sprinted together, the heat licking at their backs in a hellish embrace. Julian could hear the distant sounds of sirens growing louder, blending with cries of panic and the echoes of crackling fire. Julian's heart raced. They needed to get to safety, but it felt like they were running in circles. Each step took him deeper into chaos, and the weight of helplessness threatened to crush him. He stole a glance at the girl beside him. Her small eyes were filled with terror, and he wished more than anything to shield her from the horror unfolding around them. "Keep your eyes on me," he shouted, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "We're going to be okay." The words rang hollow even to his own ears, but he kept moving, propelled by the instinct to protect her. Behind them, the sound of shouting intensified. "They're here. Secure the perimeter." The voice of a man echoed, authoritative and threatening. The realization sent icy dread skimming down Julian's spine. Who were these people? "Faster," the officer urged, pushing them toward a line of emergency vehicles that, oddly, seemed to part like an ocean in front of them. It was a surreal sight, with fire trucks parked at odd angles, sirens blaring, and paramedics rushing to treat the victims who had escaped the inferno. Suddenly, the girl stumbled, tripping on a piece of debris. Julian felt time slow as he looked back. Her face crumpled in fear, and instinct kicked in. He crouched to her level. "You okay?" It took all his strength not to scream. I can't get up," she whimpered, tears streaming down her cheeks, mingling with the soot and ash smearing her face. The world around them began to blur as Julian struggled with panic. They weren't safe yet. How could he leave her there? As he reached for her, the shadows loomed closer, and a fleeting sense of doom draped over him. He felt a surge of adrenaline, the kind that could make you act out of sheer desperation. "I'll help you." He lifted her into his arms, feeling the weight of her small body against him, a burden that was his to bear. He pushed through the cacophony, dodging between emergency personnel who were shouting instructions and trying to manage the throng of terrified survivors. But as he neared the line of vehicles, a menacing figure emerged, a man in a dark suit with slick hair, his features sharp and calculating. There was something wicked in his smile as he stepped forward, blocking their path. "Going somewhere?" Julian froze, heart pounding. The man's gaze flicked to the girl, a predatory glint flashing in his eyes. "You shouldn't be running, little one. It's not safe out here." "No! Move!" Julian yelled, his voice cracking with the weight of fear. He repositioned the girl in his arms, eyes darting for another escape route. Rage surged within him, the instinct to protect overpowering logic. "Let her go. She has got nothing to do with this," Julian growled, squaring his shoulders defiantly. The man chuckled, tilting his head as if amused. "You really think you understand the game being played here? You can't outrun what you don't see coming." Julian was out of options. He could feel the eyes on him, expecting him to falter, to give in. But that wouldn't happen. Not today. "Behind you!" shouted one of the paramedics suddenly, panic flooding his voice. A group of figures emerged from the smoke, moving with purpose as they drew closer. Julian turned instinctively, adrenaline pumping. The looming danger had arrived. "Run!" he bellowed to the girl, racing toward the emergency vehicles, as he felt the weight of his decision seep into every fiber of his being. Fear and fury fused into a singular drive. Escape. But with every step, the realization dawned. This chase was only beginning, and the forces behind it were far more insidious than mere survival. Would they ever truly escape? The question burned in his mind as he propelled them forward into the swirling shadows, knowing the danger had only just taken form. Tension coursed through Julian as he dashed toward the emergency vehicles, the little girl still secure in his arms. The chaos around them expanded, the air thick with smoke and desperation. Sirens wailed, and the crackling flames roared like a beast just waiting to consume them. He could feel her heart racing against his chest, each beat echoing his own mounting fear. "Hold on tight," he shouted, glancing over his shoulder. The dark-suited man still stood there, his shadows stretching, menacing and unmoving like a sentinel of doom. Behind him, the group of approaching figures had transformed into a swarm, an army of dark silhouettes emerging from the flames, their purpose multifaceted and unclear. "Stop! You're not safe," one of the men yelled, but Julian knew he had no choice. He had to keep moving. Each step was a promise he made to the girl in his arms. He pushed through the throng, weaving past firefighters and paramedics, their faces painted with stress and urgency. As they dashed around the fire trucks, he spotted an opening between the vehicles. "There. We can get through there." Just as he made a break for it, a rough hand seized his shoulder. "Hold it right there," a voice barked, coarse and laced with authority. Julian's stomach dropped. He recognized the voice, a different officer from the one who initially saved them. The man eyed Julian and the girl with a mixture of confusion and concern. "Let us go," Julian pleaded, his voice hoarse. "We're not safe?" The officer's brow furrowed. "You think running is going to keep you safe? You don't know what's out there." But Julian didn't have time to explain. Fear surged through him, driving him like a wild animal desperate to escape. He twisted out of the officer's grip, continuing his flight. He could hear the officer shouting behind him, but it faded into the background noise of sirens and cries. They rounded another fire truck and came across a makeshift command center with officials barking orders at one another. Julian felt an instinctual urge to shield the girl from the chaos, pulling her closer as he searched for an escape. "Please, we have to go," she repeated, clinging tighter to him, her voice rising in panic. "Just a little farther," he reassured her, trying to mask his own fears. It felt more like a mantra than genuine comfort. The more they ran, the more he sensed the shadows closing in around them. As they sprinted past a cluster of onlookers, Julian made a split-second decision. He veered off the path, heading toward a narrow alley that was partially obscured by a fence. "This way," he urged her, pushing forward with newfound determination. But as they entered the alley, Julian saw something that made his blood run cold. A sleek black SUV sat idling at the end, engine humming ominously. Before he could process it, the door swung open, revealing the same man in the dark suit. "Get in, Julian," the man commanded, his voice smooth yet terrifyingly calm. Julian hesitated, the weight of the girl heavy in his arms as his mind raced. Was this a trap? "No!" he shouted defiantly, taking a step back, eyes darting frantically for another escape route. The man smiled, but it was devoid of warmth. "You think this is a choice? You're running out of time. Let her go." Julian felt raw desperation clawing at his chest. He could feel the girl's tiny hand trembling against his shoulder. "Decisions must be made quickly," the man pressed, stepping closer. "Either you get in, or well." He left the threat hanging as ominous as the smoke that still lingered in the air. Julian's heart raced. He swayed between terror and hope. But could he really trust this man? The seconds ticked by, each one stretching into eternity, as the shadows encroached around him. Julian. The girl's voice broke through his spiraling thoughts. I'm scared. What if they take me? That simple plea pierced through the chaos. There was only one thing he knew for sure: he had to protect her. But at what cost? He looked at the man, his pulse throbbing in his ears. What do you want with us? The man's grin widened, revealing something more sinister than just an offer. Let us just say the game has only just begun. As dread flooded Julian's veins, he felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Decisions had consequences, and the clock was ticking. What happened next could change everything for him and the girl forever. Would he step into the unknown, or could he find another way? The chaos that had turned their world upside down held them in its grip, and yet somehow Julian Kane found himself at a crossroads. With the raging storm still battling outside, his heart simultaneously thundered and quieted as he faced the dark-suited man standing before him, claiming authority over the fray. We have to hurry, the man said, gesturing toward the open door of the sleek black SUV. This is your last chance, Julian. The little girl in his arms clung to him tighter, her fear palpable as she tucked her head against his shoulder, oblivious to the weight of the choices that hung heavily in the air. I don't want to go with him, she whispered, her voice trembling. Please, don't let them take me. Julian's stomach twisted at the pleading in her eyes. Protecting her had become his sole purpose, and here was a man who threatened that innocence. I won't let them take you, he vowed quietly, leaning down to meet her gaze. You trust me, right? Always, she replied, her small chin quivering but her resolve shining through like a beacon in a storm. That flicker ignited something solid inside him, a reminder of their bond, and a resolve born out of desperation. But time was slipping away, and Julian sensed danger creeping. The other figures, shadows among shadows, were gaining ground, their intent unclear but menacing. What are you really after? He challenged, his voice firm. What game are you playing? The man smiled again, his demeanor chillingly calm. Control, Mr. Kane. The kind of control you thought you could escape today. Choose wisely. Julian's mind raced. The stakes had always been high, but now they had twisted grotesquely. They weren't only fighting the storm outside, they were fighting unseen enemies within. The choice before him felt like falling into a chasm or daring to jump with a parachute made of hope. Taking a deep breath, he pulled the girl even closer. We need to find another way, he declared with fierce determination. We're not playing your game. Without another word, he turned sharply, scanning their surroundings for an escape. He caught sight of a path leading to one of the fire trucks, the one that had blossomed into a haven amidst the chaos. Hold on tight, he urged as they dashed away from the danger trailing behind. Julian, she urged, squeezing him. What if they get us? He felt the weight of her fear, a mixture of all the past horrors she had faced. They won tea, he insisted, pushing into the crowd of emergency personnel. The chaos outside transformed into chaotic hope. Amidst the madness, he kept moving, fueled by both love and a fierce urge to protect. The ground shook beneath them, but Julian never faltered, his heart beating a frantic rhythm of adrenaline. He spotted a group of paramedics tending to another survivor, panic aside, as they focused on the task at hand, familiar with crisis but still unprepared for what could roil within it. Over here, Julian shouted as they approached, his voice breaking the air filled with shouts and colors. Is everyone okay? One of the medics shouted back, eyes scanning the little girl, who still pressed against Julian's side. We need help, Julian gasped out, the dire need surfacing through the crowd. They're chasing us. Please. The paramedics quickly understood the look of rising terror in Julian's eyes. Get her inside. Secure the load, they called out, waving to the other responders. They didn't ask questions, they acted. The door opened, revealing a refuge, but Julian hesitated for a brief moment, looking over his shoulder. Behind them, the man in the suit moved closer, that dark smile growing more impenetrable with each step. "Now!" the medic urged, desperation creeping into his voice. With no time to weigh options, Julian surged forward with the girl nestled tightly in his arms. The moment they stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind them, cutting off the man's approach, though Julian could still sense his presence like a shadow outside. The medic quickly began assessing the girl. "What happened to her?" She scared Julian started, breathless. A moment of relief washed over him knowing she was safe within the confines of the ambulance. He willed himself to focus. "But she's all right." "We need to." A sudden thud rattled the ambulance, and his hope wavered as he turned back, heart racing with fear once more. "Get ready to move," the medic commanded, as more sirens filled the air, and Julian could see chaos pulling further away from them, shifting and shaping like living beings. Without having processed how, Julian found himself wrestling with fury. How had things spiraled into a chase that cost them what they couldn't afford to lose: belonging, trust, maybe even life itself? But he knew one thing remained. He promised to keep her safe. In this moment, with the weight of the storm consequences suffocating their past, he took the little girl's hand. "No matter what happens next, we'll face it together." Together, they would navigate the storm, survive the odds stacked against them, and maybe, just maybe, build something new from the ashes of chaos. As sirens wailed, and the world spun into disarray, Julian felt the flicker of hope reignite within him, a flickering flame, which, against the chaos, grew stronger. And they'd emerge from this storm, or they wouldn't. Either way, he wouldn't lose her. Beneath the darkened sky, the pair clung to each other, as the shadows fell around them, a family born of necessity and love, forged in the heart of a storm. With a sigh of determined resolve, Julian whispered, "This is just the beginning." The storm still raged, but within it, hope danced like sunlight breaking through. Each shadow could lead to light, and they were ready to chase it together. You need to subscribe now, if you want to follow Julian and the little girl's journey, as they take on their next challenge head-on, and see where their bond leads them. Smash the like button now, to help this story reach other hearts out there, and flood the comments section with your thoughts about how they should navigate this wild ride ahead. Don't wait even one more second to share this with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support for this channel.